My name's Dylan. I'm 36, and for the last 8 years, my family's treated me like the emergency exit they pull when the building's already on fire. You know, the type handles bills, calls back on time, remembers anniversaries, shows up when the car breaks down or someone ends up in the ER. I didn't sign up to be the dependable one. I just became it. One late rent check at a time, one just this once favor after another. Eventually, it stopped being help. It became a job. And no one even pretended it was temporary. I tolerated it mostly for peace until last Sunday. My niece, Sophie, turned 9. Bright kid, loves horses, Minecraft, and has this laugh that sounds like sunshine bottled up. I adore her. Every year, I make sure her birthday is memorable, especially since my brother Ryan and his wife Chelsea, Sophie's parents, have this talent for last-minute panic and logistical chaos. Last year, they tried to book a park pavilion 4 days before the party. It got double booked. I saved it with a bounce house rental and food delivery. Cost me 1,000. They didn't reimburse me. Not even a hey, that helped a lot. This year, I beat them to it. I reserved a small petting zoo venue because Sophie mentioned she liked alpacas once during a car ride. I remembered. I also paid the deposit on the catering truck, brought folding chairs, set up the balloon arch, even bought the cake. Not because I was asked, but because I already knew how this would go if I didn't. Chelsea would send a vague text like, "Ugh, the bakery needs a deposit today. Should I just forward them your info?" And Ryan. He's mastered the art of silence. No asks, just long pauses and implied expectations. I did it all. Quietly, because Sophie deserved it. But here's the thing. You can only pour from your own cup for so long before you realize no one's refilling it. And this year, I felt the bottom. The party started out fine. Kids feeding goats, parents mingling by the lemonade table. Sophie was glowing. That part almost made it worth it. Almost. I kept to the background. Handed out drinks, took pictures, tipped the caterers extra when they ran out of fries. Typical Dylan things. Then came cake time. Chelsea stood center stage in this floral maxi dress that looked like a Pinterest ad. Ryan hovered beside her, drink in hand, acting like he'd personally organized the UN summit that was Sophie's party. Chelsea sliced the cake, passed out plates, and then handed me one. "Here you go," she said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Least I can do for Uncle Dylan. Always buying your way into favorite uncle status." I blinked. "Sorry, what?" She laughed. "Not the warm kind, the sharp kind that makes your stomach tighten. Come on, it's a joke. You know you're the wallet of the family. No shame in that." Ryan chuckled like he'd just heard peak stand-up. "Hey, if I had your job, I'd throw money at everything too." I stood there holding a stupid slice of funfetti cake, wondering when exactly I became a punchline in a party I funded. My mom, sitting nearby, didn't even look up. Just muttered, "Let it go, Dylan. Not worth it, not today." Funny. I'd heard that before. When Ryan dented my car and denied it. When Chelsea used my Amazon account to buy Sophie's school iPad. When they forgot to tell me they'd switched Sophie's school but still expected me to keep paying the tuition. Let it go. I looked over at the gift table. A shiny envelope from me sat there untouched. Inside it, a cashier's check for Sophie's next semester at that overpriced academy Ryan insisted was life-changing. They hadn't thanked me. Sophie didn't even know it was from me. I overheard Chelsea tell someone it was a collective family gift. I set the cake down, walked to the table, picked up the envelope. Chelsea blinked. What are you doing?" I didn't yell. Didn't throw anything. I just said loud enough for her Ryan and anyone paying half attention to hear, "Good luck finding another sponsor." I canceled the tuition payment. She froze. "What?" I turned to leave. Calm, measured, done. "You can't do that," she shrieked. "Dylan, you promised." "No," I said, not looking back. "You assumed. Big difference." I'd made it halfway down their gravel driveway when I heard fast footsteps. Of course it was Ryan. "Dude, wait. Come on." He sounded winded, like he'd just jogged for the first time since high school. "Don't be like this. Your family." That word, family. Always whipped out like duct tape after they break something. I stopped, slowly turned. Ryan stood there, chest heaving, arms wide like he expected a hug. "Chelsea, you know how she is. She didn't mean it. She called me a wallet," I said flatly. It was a joke. No, you laughed, because you agreed. His smirk faltered. You think I haven't noticed I asked. The only time you text is when something's broken late or missing a payment. I stopped being your brother a long time ago. I became your backup plan. He didn't deny it. Not really. Just looked around like he hoped someone would pop out and fix this. Sophie needs that school, he finally said. She does, I agreed. And it's a shame her parents didn't care enough to not burn the one bridge holding that up. He reached out maybe to grab my arm, maybe to beg. I stepped back. Don't. His hand dropped. I'm not paying another bill, I said. Not for school, not for rent, not for your screw-ups. Grow up, Ryan. Behind us, I could still hear music, faint and tinny. The sound of a party I paid for but was no longer welcome at. You're really just gonna walk away? He asked, voice brittle. I nodded. Watch me. And I did. When I got back to my car, the silence was loud. The kind that used to hurt, but this time it felt honest. They'd never chased after me before. Not when I missed Thanksgiving. Not when I ghosted the family group chat for weeks. Not even when Dad called me a failure for choosing therapy over tradition. My phone buzzed. Chelsea, then Mom, then a slew of texts, all guilt, no apology. I dropped the phone into the glove box, locked it. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel like a villain for choosing peace. I didn't go straight inside when I got home. My place was dark, still clean, the kind of silence most people crave, but I had grown to resent because it didn't feel peaceful. It felt like proof that I was always the one leaving things better than I found them. For others. I parked in the driveway and just sat there for a moment, engine off, keys in my lap, listening to the quiet hum of my own heartbeat. It hit me how unfamiliar that stillness was. Nobody needing me, no fire to put out, no passive-aggressive text wrapped in emojis. I wasn't sure if it was relief or grief. Eventually, I got out and walked around the back. I had built a small patio there last summer, just a couple chairs and a string of lights I barely used. That night, though, I sat down, grabbed a bottle of water from the outdoor fridge and stared at the sky until it blurred into navy and stars. I thought about Sophie. I really did. That kid didn't ask for any of this mess. She didn't choose her parents, didn't pick the dysfunction she was born into. She just loved alpacas and slime videos and asking questions about the moon. She deserved better than the chaos Ryan and Chelsea kept normalizing. And if nothing else, she deserved the truth. I got up, eventually went inside, and opened the drawer in my office. Inside was an envelope. Not the party one. A different one. Thicker. Labeled in black Sharpie, just in case. I pulled it out, flipped it open. Inside were every receipt, every screenshot, every email chain from the past 4 years of me financially bailing them out. Itemized, sorted by category. Groceries, medical bills, school fees, party expenses. One highlighted entry showed the hotel I paid for during that power outage winter storm. They didn't even tell me they were staying until I saw their Instagram story. Cozy night, in a sweet thanks, universe, no Dylan's credit card. I scanned the pages again, checking for errors. None. I'd made sure of that months ago. And now it wasn't just a record. It was armor. I clicked open my laptop and typed an email. Simple, direct. I sent it to Sophie's school administration, their financial office, and copied my old college roommate, now the vice chair of the school's board. I let them know I was no longer financially responsible for Sophie's tuition. I offered full transparency, explained the payments had always come from my personal account without formal obligation, and that future communication should be directed to the parents listed on file. Within 5 minutes, I got a reply from my friend. Got it. Honestly, that explains a lot. You okay? I typed back. Getting there. Coffee soon. Then I created a digital folder, uploaded the files, named it Evidence Family, and bookmarked it under a hidden tab. Not to blackmail anyone, not to make a show of it, just so I'd never second-guess myself again. The next morning, the storm hit. Chelsea rang the doorbell before 10 a.m. Not a call, not a text, just showed up in my driveway like she hadn't tried to turn me into a joke 18 hours earlier. I saw her from the upstairs window. She was pacing like she wasn't sure whether to apologize or explode. I opened the door after a full minute. She looked startled, like she hadn't expected me to answer. "We need to talk," she said. Her voice was small. Not fake sweet, not smug, just worn. I stepped aside but didn't say anything. She walked in like she owned the place, like nothing had changed, like it wasn't her own words that lit the fuse. She started talking before I sat down. The school called. They said payments were canceled, that financial aid might be impacted. "Dylan, what did you do?" I leaned on the kitchen counter, arms crossed. I told them the truth, that I'm not her guardian, that I've been covering things out of guilt, not duty, and that I'm done. Her mouth opened, closed. She looked stunned, like someone had pulled the floor out from under her. "You can't just walk away," she said. "That's not fair to Sophie." I shook my head slowly. What's not fair is raising her in a house where honesty is optional and gratitude is extinct. She blinked. "You think this makes you some kind of hero, walking out leaving a kid behind?" "No," I said, "I think it makes me free." She didn't know what to do with that. She stood there, arms folded tight, like she could hold the moment together by sheer force. "Ryan says you're overreacting, that it wasn't that serious." I looked her dead in the eye. "He's right. It wasn't serious. That was the problem." She stepped back, rattled. And then, like clockwork, came the guilt trip. Sophie cried when she found out. "She doesn't understand. You're her favorite person. She thinks you don't love her anymore." That one cut deep. But I didn't flinch. "Tell her I do. Then tell her the truth. That grown-ups messed up. That grown-ups said things they shouldn't have. And that sometimes even people we love have to protect themselves." Chelsea's eyes filled. Not tears of understanding, not even regret, just fear. Because for the first time, her safety net was gone, and she had no backup plan. I walked her to the door. She lingered, half expecting a hug or some kind of last-minute reversal. I opened the door and waited. "Dylan," she said quietly, "you've always been the reliable one. Why now?" "Because being reliable isn't the same as being responsible for your consequences." Then I closed the door, slowly, firmly. 3 days passed. Nothing from Ryan. Nothing from Mom. I stopped checking the family chat. I deleted the group thread. I cooked dinner like I had time. Took walks without worrying who would need me next. I breathed, deep, clear breaths. For the first time in years, the weight wasn't mine. On day 4, the silence broke. Voicemail from Mom. "We need to talk. You're tearing this family apart." I knew what that meant. It meant it was time for step 2. And this time, I was ready. Step 2 wasn't dramatic. It didn't involve shouting or locked doors. It was quiet, clean, intentional. The kind of move you don't make out of anger, but from the clarity that comes when you've finally had enough. The morning Mom said she was coming over, I was already prepared. I'd spent the night gathering documents, sorting everything into a binder. Not just for show, for truth. Every bank transfer, canceled check, digital receipt, and text message request Ryan or Chelsea had sent over the years. Urgent, emergency, just this once. The pattern was laughable once you laid it all out. A timeline of dependence dressed up as family love. I added a second envelope, this one addressed to my lawyer. Inside was a notarized letter I'd quietly prepared months ago, back when I first got the feeling I'd need a boundary no one could cross. The letter revoked any implied financial responsibility I had for Ryan's family. It also officially removed me as executor of my father's trust. I wasn't going to let them drag me back in when that storm finally hit. I texted my lawyer to confirm he'd received it. He replied within 5 minutes, "Smart move. Long overdue." That was the last piece. I took a breath, closed the binder, and set it on the kitchen counter. When Mom arrived, she didn't knock. She never did. She walked in like she always had, like nothing had changed. She wore her usual expression, half concern, half disappointment, like I was a teenager who needed reminding how to be decent. She spotted the binder immediately. "What's this?" I gestured. "Everything I've paid for since 2019. Itemized, labeled." I figured we should talk with facts, not feelings. She opened it, flipped through a few pages. Her brows furrowed deeper with each turn. "Why are you doing this?" "Because you said I was tearing the family apart. So let's look at who's been holding it together." She sighed, closed the binder, and sat down at the table. That sigh, it was the same one she used when I didn't finish my vegetables as a kid, or when I skipped Easter once to take a mental break. A sigh that said I was being difficult. "You're missing the point," she said. "It's not about money, Dylan. It's about love, family." I laughed. Not loud, just a single dry exhale. Love doesn't come with invoices. But when it does, it shouldn't be a surprise when someone asks to stop footing the bill. Her face changed. Not guilt, not empathy, just a subtle tightening, a wall going up. "You've always been the strong one," she said. "The capable one. That's why we lean on you. You make it look easy. So easy that nobody thinks to say thank you." She didn't respond. "Mom," I said calmly, "I'm not doing this out of spite. I'm doing it because I finally realized that keeping everyone else afloat was costing me more than money. It was costing me myself." She looked away, silent. And then she asked what I knew she came to ask all along. "So you're cutting us all off?" "No," I said. "I'm cutting off the assumption that I owe you my peace to preserve your comfort. If anyone needs something, they can ask. I'll decide. But this cycle, me saving everyone, being the emotional safety net while you all ignore the damage, is over." She opened her mouth, maybe to argue, maybe to guilt me, but then she stopped. She stood, smoothed her sweater, and gave me that look, the one that meant she didn't agree, but she knew she couldn't stop me. "I hope you can live with this. I'm counting on it," I said. She walked out without another word. The door clicked shut behind her like the closing of a chapter I'd reread too many times. 2 weeks passed. I heard nothing from Ryan, nothing from Chelsea. And for once, that silence didn't feel like punishment. It felt like peace. I didn't spend my evenings waiting for the next disaster text. I didn't check my phone expecting passive-aggressive guilt. I didn't pace the kitchen debating if I should reach out. I just lived. I cooked meals that took longer than 15 minutes. I slept in. I read books that weren't about productivity. I took long walks, no destination in mind. I remembered what it felt like to not brace for the next ask. And then just when I started to think maybe the worst had passed, I got a knock on the door. Not Chelsea, not Ryan, not Mom. It was Sophie. Backpack slung over her shoulder, hair a little messy, cheeks pink from the cold. She looked nervous, like she wasn't sure if she should even be there. I opened the door. "Hey," she said. I don't think I was supposed to come." I crouched to meet her eyes. "You're always welcome here, Soph. What's going on?" She hesitated. "They're fighting. A lot. Mom and Dad. About the school. About you. I wanted to say thank you. For the party. For the school. For everything." I swallowed hard. "You don't have to thank me, kiddo. I did those things because I care about you." She looked down. "They said you don't anymore." I placed a hand on her shoulder. "That's not true. But sometimes when adults make bad choices, the people who've been covering for them have to stop. Otherwise, the cycle just keeps going. You get that?" She nodded slowly, like she didn't fully understand yet, but maybe one day she would. "Can I still come over sometimes?" "Anytime," I said. "Always." That night, we made grilled cheese, watched an old animated movie, played cards until her mom called looking for her. Chelsea didn't say much. Just told me to send Sophie home. I did. But not before slipping a small envelope into her backpack. Inside was a prepaid debit card, enough for books or art supplies or whatever she needed, and a sticky note that read, "For you, not your parents." I never heard a word from Chelsea about it. And that was fine, because this wasn't about her anymore. Over the next few months, things shifted. I stopped replying to texts that only came when someone needed something. I went back to therapy, not because I was broken, but because I finally had space to unpack how long I'd been expected to fix everyone else. I took a solo trip to the mountains, sat by a lake for 2 days without speaking to anyone, left my phone on Do Not Disturb. It felt like healing. Quiet, overdue healing. At Christmas, I didn't go to the family gathering. Instead, I took Sophie to a science museum. We ate too much popcorn and stayed out until the city lights flickered on. She told me she was thinking about being an architect one day. I told her she'd build incredible things. And then, after a pause, she looked up and said, "You seem happier now." And I realized I was. Not because I won anything, not because I cut people off for revenge, but because I stopped letting guilt write the script of my life. Because I finally chose peace. Sophie's comment stayed with me longer than I expected. Not because it surprised me, but because it confirmed something I hadn't been able to admit out loud. I wasn't just less stressed. I was lighter. I wasn't waiting for disaster to knock on my door. I wasn't keeping a mental checklist of family fires I'd be asked to put out. I wasn't calculating how much of my life I could afford to give away this month. I was just living. And the longer I stayed in that space, the more I realized how unnatural it had felt to exist any other way. A few weeks later, I got another voicemail from Ryan. First one in almost 2 months. His tone was different, less defensive, more flat, like he was tired of pretending to be the victim, but didn't know how to pivot. He said he wanted to talk, said things had been harder than expected, and that maybe we could find a way to move forward. I didn't respond right away. I listened to the message twice. Once as the older brother who used to jump in and solve everything, then again as the version of me who was finally free. The second time, I heard what he wasn't saying. No apology, no ownership, just a vague hint that maybe if I softened, he could feel better again. I waited 3 days, then sent a short reply. "I'm open to talking, but only if it's honest. I'm not here to reset the clock on your comfort." He didn't reply. That silence told me everything. Because here's what I'd learned: people who are used to your boundaries being flexible will always call you the problem when you finally hold the line. A few more weeks passed. March rolled in quietly. Sophie started calling more often just to chat, not to ask for anything. Sometimes she'd tell me about her science projects or a weird dream she had. Once, she asked if she could bring a friend over to see my telescope. I said yes before she even finished the question. It felt good, clear, simple, mutual. No strings, no guilt, just connection. One Saturday afternoon, as I was cleaning out the garage, I found an old storage box I hadn't touched in years. Inside were random pieces of my past photos from college, a half-broken mug from a company I'd helped build, even a thank you card from Ryan from back when we still spoke in full sentences. I almost threw it away. But then I stopped. Not out of sentiment, but curiosity. The message inside was short. Just 5 words: "Couldn't have done it without you." And I remember back then I believed it. I thought I was part of something bigger, that helping him meant we were a team. That someday when he was on his feet, he'd look back and remember who helped him build the staircase. But he didn't. He climbed it, then kicked dirt on the person holding the bottom step. I put the card back in the box, not because I needed the memory, but because I wanted the reminder. Never again. That same evening, I got a text from Mom. Not her usual guilt trip. Just a simple line. "Can we talk?" I stared at it for a full minute before replying. "Sure, come by tomorrow afternoon, just you." She showed up at 2, no bags, no baked goods. Just her a bit more quiet than usual, like she wasn't sure if this door would still open. I made tea. She sat at the table, fingers folded, expression unreadable. "Dylan," she said finally. "I didn't come to fight." "Good," I said, "because I wouldn't have let it happen." That made her smile just a little. She took a sip, looked out the window. "I've been thinking about everything, about what you said, about what I didn't say when I should have. I stayed quiet. She kept going. You've done a lot. More than we deserved. More than we ever thanked you for. I think I told myself that because you didn't complain it was fine. That because you were the strong one, you didn't need anything back. I nodded slowly. That's the trap. Strong people don't make noise, so everyone assumes they're not breaking. She met my eyes. I'm sorry for making you feel alone in all of this. For leaning too hard. For letting the others do it too. I wanted to say I forgave her, but the truth was I wasn't sure yet. So I said the next best thing. Thank you for saying that. She looked relieved, like even that small crack in the door was more than she thought she'd get. Ryan's struggling, she added. He won't admit it, but he is. I know I said, but that doesn't make him my problem. She nodded. I understand. I just hope someday he learns what you did, how to stand on his own. We didn't talk about Chelsea, or the school, or the party. Some things didn't need to be rehashed. They were already carved into the wall. After she left, I stood in the hallway for a while staring at the closed door. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel vindicated. I just felt settled, like a storm had passed and left everything still. A few days later, Sophie called. This time, she asked if I could come to her school's art fair. She'd won a small award for a sculpture she made. A lopsided clay dolphin, she said. Not perfect, but it's kind of funny, she added. I smiled. Sounds amazing. I'll be there, even if Mom's weird about it, especially then. I showed up that Friday evening, a bouquet of paper flowers in hand because she once told me real ones die too fast. Her face lit up when she saw me. She pulled me over to her little display table like I was some celebrity she'd been bragging about. Chelsea was there too. She didn't say much, just a tight smile and a quick nod. I nodded back. That was all the closure I needed. Sophie's sculpture wasn't perfect. It wobbled slightly on its base and looked more like a potato with fins. But it was hers, and she was proud. As I stood beside her, surrounded by crayon drawings and glitter explosions, I realized something. I hadn't just stepped back from my family. I'd stepped into something more honest. A relationship with Sophie that wasn't built on guilt or obligation. One that didn't need middlemen. One that would last because it was real. After the fair, she handed me a folded note. I didn't open it until I got home. It was written in purple marker, uneven but clear. Thanks for always showing up. You don't have to fix everything. I just like when you're there. I sat on the couch, note in hand, and felt something in my chest loosen. Not sadness, not regret, just quiet relief. Like the weight I'd carried all these years finally recognized it wasn't mine. And let go. I kept that note from Sophie in the top drawer of my desk. Not for sentiment, not even for memory, but because it grounded me. Those words didn't ask for money, didn't come with strings, didn't disguise need as flattery. They were pure. A reminder of why I'd drawn the line in the first place. Not to punish anyone, but to protect what still mattered. Over the next few weeks, my days began to settle into something close to rhythm. I worked, I walked, I cooked. I reached out to friends I hadn't seen in years. Said yes to things I used to decline: movie nights, hiking trips, weekend drives with no destination. I was building something slowly, quietly. A life that didn't revolve around other people's emergencies. And in that space, I started to see just how much of myself I'd handed away over the years thinking it was love. I used to believe being dependable meant being selfless. But now I understood something deeper, that real love doesn't demand self-erasure. It honors presence, not performance. One quiet Sunday, I was sorting mail when a thick envelope caught my eye. No return address, but I recognized the handwriting. Ryan. I opened it slowly, unsure what I was bracing for: an apology, a guilt trip, maybe just a confused attempt to reach out. Inside was a letter, 3 pages, neatly written. No dramatic buildup, no angry scribbles, just words. The first sentence caught me off guard. I think I messed up worse than I realized. He went on to describe the aftermath, how tuition had come due, and no one was there to bail them out. How Chelsea blamed him, how their arguments had become routine, how even Sophie started asking questions they couldn't answer without lying. He didn't ask for help, not once. That's what made me read the whole thing. He admitted things I never thought he'd say, that he took me for granted, that he let Chelsea's attitude warp how he saw me, that he laughed at things that weren't jokes because he didn't want to deal with the truth. He didn't beg me to come back. He didn't say sorry and expect it to fix everything. He just said, "I finally see it now. I don't expect forgiveness. I just wanted you to know I'm trying." I sat with that letter for a long time, not angry, not emotional, just still, trying to decide what mattered more, the damage that had already been done or the fact that for once the door wasn't being kicked open. It was being knocked on, lightly. I didn't write back immediately. I gave it a week. Then I sent a short note, handwritten, no flourish. "Thank you for the letter. I hear you. Take care of Sophie. That's what matters most." That was all I had in me, and it was enough. A few days later, I ran into Chelsea at the grocery store. I almost didn't recognize her. No makeup, sweatshirt, too big hair, pulled back like she hadn't slept. She spotted me before I could turn away. We locked eyes across the produce aisle, and for a second, everything went still. No accusations, no fake smiles, just two people who knew too much about each other to pretend anymore. She walked over slow, said my name. Her voice wasn't cold, but it wasn't warm either. It was neutral. Careful. "I heard you got the letter," she said. I nodded. I did. She paused, looked down at the floor tiles. I didn't think he'd actually write it. "Neither did I said. She glanced up. "I'm not here to stir things up. I just wanted to say I was wrong. About a lot. About you. About how much you were holding together." I didn't speak, just listened. That was all she seemed to want to be heard. She shifted her weight, looked toward the oranges like they might save her. "We're figuring stuff out. Not fixed, but we're trying. I thought you should know." I gave her a nod. Not forgiveness, not invitation, just acknowledgement. She turned to leave, then stopped. "Sophie still talks about you like you're made of magic." That hit a place I hadn't touched in a while. I smiled, small, genuine. "She's the magic. I just showed up." Chelsea didn't cry. She didn't reach out or ask for anything. She just nodded back and walked away. It was the most honest moment we'd ever had. That night, I sat on the patio and watched the sky darken. The air smelled like spring was trying to push its way through the cold. I closed my eyes and thought about the long road behind me. The years I spent mistaking compliance for compassion. The birthdays, the bailouts, the unpaid IOUs written in silence. And now the new shape of things. Not perfect, not tied up with a bow, but grounded, real. The next weekend, Sophie came over again. No fanfare, no requests, just her, a tote bag full of colored pencils and a new sketchbook she wanted to show me. She'd drawn a treehouse complete with rope ladders and solar lights. "This is my dream project," she said, eyes bright. "I want to build something like this one day, with real wood, not just paper." I told her it was beautiful, that it was bold and creative and totally hers. She asked if I'd help her build a model version. I said yes, no hesitation, not because I owed her, but because I wanted to. That's the difference. We spent hours cutting cardboard and gluing little popsicle sticks. It was messy and perfect. At one point, she stopped and looked at me. "Do you think Mom and Dad will ever be okay again?" I didn't lie. I think they're trying, and that matters. But no matter what happens, you've got people who care about you, really care. That won't change. She nodded slowly, like that answer settled something for her. That night after she left, I found myself smiling without reason. Not because anything miraculous had happened, but because the weight was finally where it belonged. Shared, balanced, human, not mine alone to carry. And for the first time, I didn't just feel like I'd survived the storm. I felt like I was learning how to live in the calm that followed. Spring came in slow this year, like it was being cautious, testing the ground before fully stepping in. The days grew longer, not dramatically, but just enough for the air to feel less heavy. I started leaving my windows open in the mornings. The breeze smelled like new grass and wet pavement, like something ending and beginning all at once. Sophie visited more often. Not every weekend, but enough that the silence in my house felt less like absence and more like balance. Sometimes she brought a new book to talk about, or a weird snack she wanted me to try. Once she showed up with a half-built robot kit she said was too boring for Dad. I helped her finish it in one afternoon. When she left that evening, she said, "It's nice here. It feels quiet but happy." And I knew exactly what she meant. It wasn't just about noise. It was about safety, about not having to shrink or perform to earn someone's patience, about presence being enough. I hadn't heard much from Ryan since the letter. He didn't try to reinsert himself into my life. And strangely, I respected that. He was learning, I think, slowly, maybe painfully, that sometimes the deepest change doesn't come with apologies, it comes with space, letting things grow where silence used to be. I did get one more note from him. Just a short message inside a birthday card. No big speech. Just, "Hope you're doing well. Thanks for not giving up on Sophie." That was it. I pinned it to my fridge not as a symbol of repair, but as a reminder that healing sometimes shows up as a whisper, not a parade. I spent more time outside now. Planted a few herbs on the patio. Bought a second chair for the deck, not because I needed it, but because I wanted to leave room for the unexpected. For the kind of visits that didn't require warning. The kind that just happened when people felt welcome. And then without much warning, my mom showed up again. This time she brought something. A small tin, the kind she used to store cookies in during the holidays. She didn't say anything when I opened the door, just handed it to me with a half smile and said, "You should read what's inside." Not all at once, but eventually. I took it without question. She didn't come in, didn't linger, just turned around, got back in her car, and drove off. I stood in the doorway for a minute, then opened the tin. Inside were letters, old ones. Some I recognized drawings Sophie made as a toddler, school flyers with my name scrawled on them. But there were new ones too. One from Mom, handwritten, explaining that after our last talk, she started writing down things she wished she'd said earlier. Gratitudes, regrets, memories she realized only now had weight. She didn't ask for anything in the letter, didn't excuse herself. She just owned it, quietly, gently. I read the first 3 pages. That was enough for now. It didn't fix everything, but it didn't have to. Some things aren't meant to be fixed, just understood, accepted, integrated. The rest of the tin stayed on my shelf. I figured I'd open another letter when I felt ready. No rush, no pressure. That night, I poured myself a cup of tea and sat out back. The lights flicked on as the sun dipped low. A soft orange filled the horizon, casting long shadows across the deck. I thought about the last year, about how a birthday party turned into a reckoning, about how silence for once became something sacred, and about how choosing myself didn't mean turning my back on others. It just meant I wasn't going to bleed for people who never asked how deep the cuts were. Sophie texted me later. A picture of her treehouse model next to the real one her class was building in shop. "We're not allowed to use solar lights," she wrote, but I snuck in some anyway. I laughed, texted back, "That's the spirit. Let there be light." And in a way there was. In places I hadn't expected. In moments I never planned for. I still get the occasional text from Chelsea. Small things. Photos of Sophie winning a ribbon. A thank you when the school sent out a note about a former sponsor who anonymously covered art program supplies. That was me, of course. But I never signed my name. Some things don't need credit. They just need to happen. One evening, I ran into one of Ryan's old co-workers at a bookstore downtown. He didn't know all the details, but he mentioned that Ryan had started freelancing again. Said he seemed different lately, more focused, less scattered. I nodded and said nothing, because that was enough. Knowing the pattern was changing, knowing the silence wasn't wasted, that it had done what noise never could. The next family event I actually attended was months later, a small birthday dinner for Mom. Nothing fancy, just a quiet meal at a restaurant she liked. Ryan was there, so was Chelsea. The energy was different, not tense, not fake, just civil. We didn't pretend things were perfect. We just let the evening breathe. Midway through dessert, Sophie leaned over and said, "This is the first time in forever no one's yelling or whispering secrets." I smiled. "Maybe we're all learning how to be better." She nodded, thoughtful. "I like this version of us." And so did I. We weren't healed. We weren't suddenly close-knit. But we were trying. Separately, yes, but intentionally. And maybe that's the point. Family isn't about constant closeness or unquestioned sacrifice. It's about showing up with honesty, about not hiding behind duty, about letting go when holding on starts to hurt. Months later, Sophie graduated from middle school. Her project, a portfolio of architectural designs based on everyday objects. She named one model the Anchor House. It had clean lines, strong foundations, and a quiet room in the back with big windows and a hammock. She pointed to it and said, "This one's inspired by you." Because even when everything else was loud, you stayed calm. You made room. I didn't cry. I just nodded. Because that's what healing feels like. Not explosive, not dramatic, just steady. Like the moment you realize you've been carrying a weight for so long, your body forgot what it felt like to be upright. And then one day you put it down. And you don't collapse. You rise. Not to prove a point, not to be noticed, but simply because you can. That's where this story ends, not with revenge, not with applause, but with a man sitting in the quiet of his own home, finally hearing his own heartbeat, and finding at last that it sounds like peace. Story 2. Adam is my name. My age is 33. And I've been the family's ATM with a pulse for the last 10 years. This was not always the case. I believed we were close. This was the type of family that shared jokes, watched out for one another, and celebrated birthdays with karaoke or worse, lousy cake. However, that altered at some point. Despite foregoing education and landing a job right out of high school, I was still able to establish a career for myself. At the age of 23, I launched a logistics business after 5 years of eking out a living. Something made sense. Contracts came flooding in. I did more than simply get by. I prospered. Additionally, the calls from home increased as soon as the money began to come. It began modestly. A vehicle payment there, a couple hundred here. The credit card debt followed. Mom's dental work, Dad's vehicle, the tuition for my sister. Additionally, my brother Jason was constantly in need of a little something to tide him over. The golden kid was him. Even after quitting 3 consecutive jobs and dropping out of college twice. However, each time he crashed, the entire family pretended it was an isolated incident. For example, I had enough to spare, and Jason simply had poor luck. I didn't really resist. It was okay, I told myself. When you made it, you did it to aid your family. But as time went on, I became aware of something. Each thank you became shorter. The volume of each request increased, and thanks somewhere along the line transformed. It all culminated at Jason's wedding at last. In order to make that day happen, I had already spent an absurd amount of money. Like boiling a frog, my folks gradually coerced me into it. Merely assistance with the location. Well, without the photographer, we couldn't do flowers. The cake is then excluded from the catering. Finally, Jason's big day has arrived. Just cover the rest, please. And I did. All in. I paid just under $100,000, and I was never asked if I was okay with it. They simply anticipated it. As if I were repaying some unseen debt. For having the audacity to succeed without a degree I owed them. The actual wedding was stunning. I'll give that large vineyard to them. A string quartet performs a gentle instrumental rendition of Can't Help Falling in Love as the sun sets. In real life, everything appeared to have exploded like a Pinterest board. I couldn't get rid of the sensation that I wasn't actually there, though, even as people danced and clinked glasses under the fairy lights. The program did not include my name, wasn't seated close to the bride and groom, was not even invited to talk. I assumed it was because Jason was overburdened. I told myself anyway. The speeches followed. After the best man, my dad, who had already had a few drinks, took the mic. When he believes he's being clever, he wears that smug half smile. And he gave me a straight look. Jason would find someone special, we always knew. Dad started slurring a little. He is charming, attractive, and now at last he is getting married. Regarding Adam, he laughed, allowing the silence to linger. He is not wed. Ignorant. At least he's good for a check, though. Laughter broke out in the room. Not uncomfortable. Laughs, laughter. Jason even chuckled. As if it were all in good humor, my mother covered her mouth. Ava, the bride, gave a kind smile but remained silent. I simply froze. I sat there looking at them. I have no idea how long. I was too stunned to be angry, too numb or embarrassed. Then something inside of me exploded. It's more like a string being cut than an abrupt outburst. Keep quiet. At last, I got up, moved to the front, and took my dad's microphone. He attempted to give it to me as if it were a friendly remark. I didn't look at him, though. I glanced at the throng. "What do you know, calm to calm?" I said. He's right. The room quieted. I'm not married. I never got a degree. I don't have a wife or a kid, but I do have something none of you seem to care about. A spine and a memory. I turned to Jason and Ava. You know that $100,000 wedding gift, the one I wired for this venue, the catering, the band, the designer gown. Forget it. You could hear a fork drop, and before anyone says it was a joke, let me remind you, jokes usually come with a punchline. That was just you laughing at the guy who made this all possible. Ava opened her mouth, probably to smooth it over, but I wasn't done. I turned to the guests. I spent the last 10 years making sure this family didn't fall apart, paid off debts, kept the lights on, covered every emergency Jason created. And in return, I got silence. I got our roles. I got treated like a donor instead of a brother. So enjoy the wine, the sunset, the string quartet. Because this is the last check any of you will ever see from me. And then I handed the mic back to the DJ and walked out behind me. I heard whispers. There was a gasp. My mother called my name. Not in protest, not in rage. I was just taken aback. As if she truly didn't anticipate this. That's when I became aware of something really disturbing. They didn't see it at all. They didn't believe they were harming them in any way. All I was doing was playing my part. The good son, the backboneless, deep-pocketed one. However, I had finished playing that role. They were unaware of the fact that I had paid for more than just the wedding, which would add a lot of intrigue to the days ahead. I was able to get in. I was in possession of receipts. I had power. Additionally, I had already made a few subtle background movements, actions that would leave them fumbling and perplexed, and all by themselves for once. However, I will address that. The wedding disaster was just the first domino, let's say. I didn't immediately return home. Rather, I drove to a hotel downtown that I had reserved the previous evening. A suite in a quiet corner away from the commotion. The congrats, the phony embrace. I sat by the window, poured myself a glass of water, and watched the city lights turn on one by one. I ought to have been upset. Perhaps I was. For the most part, though, I felt empty, as though someone had been gradually stealing parts of me for years, and I discovered the tank was empty just now. I went through my texts and scrolled. My mom missed a couple calls, Ava's one. Jason didn't. Most likely, he was still having fun. His pattern was to assume that I would calm down by morning and discreetly place the remaining bills. Make a mess. Hold on. Repeat after rinsing. However, I had a different pattern in mind this time. I opened my laptop as my first action. I went into the joint account I had set up for wedding costs. Indeed, shared. I created an account in my name with Jason and Ava listed as authorized users when the planning started. Why? Since I desired a paper trail. Covering things off the books has burned me too many times. I wanted openness this time. The account was charged for Ava's dress. After that, a deposit is charged to the account for each bouquet napkin and online rental of an inebriated groomsman suit. This is the part they were unaware of, though. I didn't merely add money to the account, I had it under control. Every payout, every transfer, every transaction. I had to give my final approval for everything. Furthermore, I still hadn't cleared the last balance, so I didn't. Rather, I placed a freeze and halted all outgoing payments. The venue had not received full payment. The caterers had yet to arrive. The string quartet covered half of the cost. It wasn't trivial. It was useful. Let's handle it like business if I weren't family and I was just a wallet. And the funding stops when the respect stops. I gazed at the "Are you certain?" long minute on the confirmation screen. Then it clicked. Indeed. My second action was to message Miranda, a friend of mine who is a lawyer. She was sharp, intelligent, and twice as petty as I was when she lost her temper. I told her everything. The contract, funding, insult, and freeze. She replied, "Give me a day," and included a laughing emoji. I'll make sure it hurts in a courteous but legal way. That was the beginning. My phone buzzed at 6:13 a.m. the following morning. Mom was the one. "Adam," she spoke in a hoarse voice. "You're aware why Jason is claiming that something occurred." "You made a scene," he said. "No, Dad," caused a commotion. As I answered, I heard her slowly exhale as if she was attempting to choose how to play it. "You know how he is, sweetie. He was only kidding. Don't refer to me as sweetie." A pause. "All right," she said, more careful now. "Take a look. There was a lot of tension, but we can talk. Jason is in pain. Ava is angry. You simply, I'm no longer your bank. Quiet. I mean it. Mom, I'm finished. You have viewed my accomplishments as a common family asset, as if it were less important than whatever catastrophe Jason walked into next. That's over now." Her voice cracked a little. "On the day of your brother's wedding, are you really going to abandon him?" I gave a sour smile. "The champagne was already paid for by me. It looks like a suitable toast." I ended the call. The text began at noon. First, Ava. "Adam, are you free to speak?" Then came after. I had no idea he would say that. "I'm very sorry." Then Jason. Only 3 words. "You are necessary to us." That was a lot of money. The previous evening, when they were giggling in a circle as if I were the butt of a sitcom, they didn't need me. I wasn't needed when I wasn't listed on the seating chart. When they used my card to reserve a $6,000 honeymoon suite in Santorini, they didn't need me. Yes, indeed. Then came that. Naturally, the travel agency I had used to book the honeymoon had assigned me even that task and canceled everything, so I called them. The remainder is due. The deposit is non-refundable. I received a call from Jason at 2:00 p.m. He gave no opening remarks. "Hi there, you called off our honeymoon?" "Yes. Man, you're going crazy." It was low. "You can't just..." I didn't. "You did. You laughed when Dad made fun of me. You are aware of his personality." "Yes. I lost my temper. Yes, I do. I'm finally taking action because of this." He opened his mouth to speak, but I finished. "I gave you everything, Jason. You handled it as though it were due each time I did. You viewed me as a contingency. This is the updated plan. No backup is available. Work it out." I muted the threat and hung up. I then inhaled deeply. I reclined in the chair and allowed the quiet to envelop me. However, the fallout was only getting started because I hadn't simply canceled my trip and frozen payments. No, I needed to play with one more piece of the puzzle, one final action that would completely change the terrain beneath them. Not the house where I lived, but a move connected to the house. I maintained a modest space, a condo with 2 bedrooms, contemporary, keep quiet, just enough space for tranquility, as well as a home office. I am referring to their home, the wedding present that my parents gave to Jason and Ava. Here's the catch, though. 3 years ago, following my mother's surgery and Dad's heart scare, I was the one who purchased it. The pressure began to build. They claimed that downsizing was necessary, claimed that the old house was too large and too remote from medical facilities. The mortgage was past due. I therefore took over, paid off the debt, bought the property outright, and even had the deed transferred into a managed trust. They had one requirement: they had to live there comfortably and without paying rent. No significant alterations or transfers without my consent. The month leading up to the wedding has arrived. Dad casually mentioned during dinner one evening that they were considering giving Jason and Ava the house as a gift. Get them off to a good start. I assumed he was kidding. Why would you do that? I inquired, using a neutral tone. Mom said, well, Jason is beginning his life while buttering a roll. He also requires stability. You've always claimed that you didn't want the house anyway. Because I own it, that is. I answered slowly. There is no hand-me-down. I covered the cost. Dad gave a hand signal. Semantics. Family is everything. That's when I ought to have stopped it. I ought to have been more firm. However, the foolish move was a part of me. I'm still trying. Believed it to be merely a thought, not a plan, just a discussion over dinner. It turns out that my parents had begun paperwork behind my back while I was raising money for a wedding. They thought I'd change my mind, so they didn't tell me. As usual, they thought I would continue to pay and smile. Now, however, it was time to teach them now. Miranda arrived the following morning. I received a tidy 2-page document from her. It described in detail how the house was bound by the trust, how legally no transfers could take place without my consent. Additionally, any unapproved attempt would not only be null and void, it would be dishonest as well. I sent my parents the PDF alone without any message. Dad didn't call for 38 minutes. You believe you're being shrewd? He ignored the greeting completely and snarled, You're going to use a piece of paper to make fun of your family. No, I said bluntly. That's what you did last night. A pause occurred. He muttered, You always take things so personally. I yelled, And you never take anything seriously. You referred to me as a checkbook with legs while you were standing in front of everyone. You all chuckle as though it were real. I'm just fulfilling the role now, closing it. You're exaggerating. No, I said again. I'm being finished. I ended the call. My mother texted 10 minutes later. It was long and meandering, a combination of half-hearted apologies and guilt-tripping. That's not how we meant it. You are aware of your dad's humor. Jason simply went along with it because he was anxious. Ava is in terrible pain. Don't punish everyone for a single moment, please. I didn't answer. Rather, I grabbed the phone and called the trust manager once more. Since certified letters to my parents, Jason and Ava, warned that the house would remain in trust and that any attempts to occupy it or change its ownership without permission would result in legal action. I asked him to start the notification process. The house was no longer the only concern. Sending a message, a last message, was the goal. However, I didn't stop there because I waited until they realized what I had done to the business fund if they felt the wedding fallout was bad. You see, Jason presented me with what he described as a can't-miss investment last year. His goal was to open a gym. Just cardio weights and a smoothie bar, nothing fancy. He lacked experience, partners, and a plan. However, he exuded the assurance of someone who had always had a safety net. Nevertheless, I gave him a contract for $40,000. I informed him that I would not be giving him the money. I was giving it away for free. Generous terms with a 6-month repayment deferment. He smiled as if he had just aced a pop quiz as he signed the contract. I never pressed it until now, and he never paid me back. I had Miranda draft a letter of intent to collect the full amount with a 30-day notice that same morning. Inaction would lead to civil litigation and the seizure of LLC-related assets. He had set up under his name idly. Was it severe? Perhaps. However, after serving as their backup plan for years, I came to the conclusion that they wouldn't alter anything if they didn't have to, and I was giving them no choice for the first time in my life. The calls had become desperate by the end of the week. Ava sobbed quietly as she left me a voicemail. I was unaware that they had done that. I was unaware of the money or the house. I promise I didn't. Please don't let a joke ruin our lives. Jason is a decent man. He just did. He admires you. I nearly fell for that one. Nearly. However, I recalled her laughter. Not loudly, perhaps, but sufficiently. Sufficient to stand next to them. Not with me. I therefore didn't answer. Rather, I reviewed my automatic payments by calling the bank. I turned them off one by one. I had been surreptitiously covering 3 of my parents' lines for their phone plan utilities and auto insurance, the regular pharmacy charge for my mom, the business card of Jason, the student loan of Ava. Yes, I have also been assisting with that. Everything ceased, and I began to sense something new as the quiet dragged on for days rather than weeks. Not resentment, not guilt, relief. I didn't wake up with 10 demands waiting in my inbox for the first time in years. I didn't prepare myself for each phone malfunction. My success didn't seem like a shared pie to me. I wiped up the crumbs while everyone else had a piece. However, I knew in my heart that the silence would end eventually. And I was correct, because I had a knock on my door last night. It was almost 10 o'clock when someone knocked. It's a firm, purposeful 3-hit rhythm rather than a gentle tap. I had a warm mug of tea in my hand, my phone on silent, and I was halfway through a documentary. I waited with the TV muted. Even though my building is secured, no one ever shows up. Not without warning, not at that hour. There was another knock. I got up slowly, put down my mug, and made my way over to the crowd. Jason. It was Jason, of course. He was wearing the same baggy jacket he always wore to job interviews. His hair was disheveled as if he had driven over in a hurry, and he never wore a tie. He appeared rattled rather than angry. He had red eyes, not from crying, most likely due to stress or fatigue. Additionally, he had something in his hand, a folder. The door was not opened by me. Raising his voice just enough to be heard over the wood, he said, "Adam, please. Only 5 minutes." I didn't respond. After a few moments of silence, he sighed, leaned forward, and put his forehead against the door. "All right, I made a mistake. I made a mistake." I remained silent, though. I believed I could make it right. He whispered. I reasoned that something would change if I took care of the honeymoon matter, spoke with Dad, or forced Ava to get in touch. It's just, though. His voice broke. Man, it's all falling apart. Additionally, I rest my head against the door. Only a slab of oak and 10 years of bitterness separated us. We were only inches apart. He took a whiff. They're in a panic. Mom is experiencing episodes of vertigo. Dad is acting as though he isn't concerned. However, he called me 3 times today to inquire about the authenticity of the notice. Due to her embarrassment to the businesses, Ava has been living with her parents. He walked away, then gave a feeble laugh. My payroll is behind schedule. I have no employees at all. I'm constantly getting texts about invoices from just 2 guys. We never owned the sound system from the wedding, despite my attempts to sell it to pay the rent. I remained motionless. Not just yet. Then the tone became softer. He used it when we were children. He also needed me to lie for him after he got into trouble. I thought maybe, even though I know I don't deserve anything from you at the moment, you might want to watch this. He presented the folder to the crowd. It's crucial. What came from you and what came from us both included the wedding budget and the statements I annotated. Most of it was unknown to Ava. She was informed that your gift consisted solely of the catering. I don't know, so I didn't tell her the rest. Perhaps pride. In the gym, he lowered the folder, the documents, the lease. I also wrote a letter. It's in there even though it's probably pitiful. I wanted you not to think. I didn't give a damn. Yes, I did. I simply didn't know how to express it to them without coming across as weak. A long pause ensued. You were someone I admired. You are aware. Continue to do so. Since your success didn't come with a wedding ring or a diploma, I grew accustomed to everyone else acting as though it wasn't genuine, but it was. I was envious because you made it real. That's the reality. Feeling envious, you didn't require their blessing. Feeling envious, mine wasn't necessary for you. At last I said something. Get out of the folder. He paused. For now, that's all. A long pause followed by a quiet, okay. He slid the paper under the door and I heard it rustle. A few minutes later, the hallway was deserted when I opened the door. Only the folder, like a white flag, rests against the frame. I sat at the table after carrying it to the kitchen and turning on the light. I kept my tea to myself. I simply opened the folder and began reading. Indeed, Jason had made the effort. Spreadsheets, receipts, handwritten notes, and small yellow tabs with scrawled explanations were all present. Adam was this person. I neglected to give him credit. This was something Dad insisted on. Expensive. Ava believed her parents were the source of this. I'm to blame. The letter followed. It was brief, hardly a page. However, it was genuine. Don't pretend to be sorry. No justifications. Just a nod of recognition. An honest, clumsy attempt to acknowledge mistakes without groveling. Although Jason struggled with language, the guilt was evident. The embarrassment may be quite profound. A glimmer of real regret. Still a spreadsheet and a letter. Years of being taken for granted should not be undone. The fact that he laughed when my father made fun of me is not negated by them. They were a start, but they don't miraculously replenish a well that has been completely dry for years. My phone buzzed as I leaned back in my chair with the letter face down. The venue coordinator sent the email. Urgent payment is the subject line. Conflict, intensification. It appears that Jason attempted to use one of the shared cards that I had frozen in order to pay the outstanding balance. The transaction was unsuccessful. My office had received a call from the coordinator suggesting that I switch banks. Before contacting their legal department, she was giving me 48 hours to fix the problem. After a long moment of staring at the screen, it finally dawned on me. Jason had not arrived to offer an apology. His purpose was to buy time. I read the email again for confirmation and continued to stare at it. 48 hours, escalated legal action, dispute over payment. That was it. That was his true motivation for coming. Not to accept responsibility, not to mature at last, and not to make amends. Only to begin applying the brakes before the entire situation went down in public. On paper, even worse. And for a moment, it was effective. I nearly thought he had changed. Nearly. I shut down my laptop and pushed the folder out of the way as if it were a bad thing. All of a sudden, the letter and the numbers felt hollow, tactical. The same entitlement that had been choking this family for years was being clung to in yet another Hail Mary to save face. I had finished allowing it to encircle me. I gave the venue coordinator a call the following morning. Hello, this is Adam Knox, who was the initial contact for the reservation. Yes, Mr. Knox, I see. Thank you for calling. We've experienced some payment difficulties. I understand, and I'm here to fix it. Excellent. So, she said, do I need to reprocess that? I refuse to pay it. A pause occurred. I apologize. I'm officially stepping down as the accountable party. The account is no longer permitted for this transaction, and the event organizers made false statements about their financial situation. Kindly forward any claims to Ava Lane and Jason Knox. They benefited the most, and I'm taking my name off of any future correspondence. You get it. One more pause. Yes, I do comprehend. Excellent. Another thing. Yesterday, they attempted to use a frozen card. They were never supposed to receive that card. Before reprocessing, you should notify your legal department. I will remember that. Fantastic. Enjoy your day. That afternoon, I abruptly eliminated the last threat. I formally filed a breach of contract complaint against Jason's Gym LLC. The paperwork was prepared. Miranda assisted with all of the filing. Court-ready, airtight. To make it real, not to break him. To hold him responsible as any grown-up would. In order to remove all secondary permissions from the house, I also informed the trust manager. No more keys were given out. Updates are not permitted. The wedding present given to Jason and Ava was formally and irrevocably off the table. Later that night, I poured myself a fresh cup of tea and shut off my phone. No texts, no calls. On the 4th, there were no days without guilt. At my workplace, I received a certified letter from Jason's lawyer. His new lawyer, that is. A last-ditch effort to postpone the lawsuit and negotiate repayment terms. Miranda gave me a single line in response. All previous family claims of financial contribution must be publicly withdrawn, and full responsibility must be admitted as part of the settlement. The letter that they returned to her. All I needed to know was that they were nothing more than threats and insults. Jason didn't apologize. All he felt was fear. Word eventually got out to the other members of the family. In a lengthy, tearful voicemail, my mother said, "You're tearing us apart, and this isn't what family does." My father never gave me a call. He only sent one text. "One day, you'll regret this." I didn't respond. I actually printed it out and taped it inside the folder after saving it. Jason walked away. A reminder of my motivation for doing this. I finally realized the truth not because I was cruel or spiteful. They weren't related. They lived on a sinking ship as tenants. And while they chuckled from the upper deck, I had been bailing water for 10 years. They accused me of causing the flood as soon as I stopped. So I walked away and let the ship sink. Half a year has passed. The case was quietly settled. Following the gym's liquidation, Jason returned a portion of the funds. Apparently, Ava left him. Between poor investments and family stress, she learned of a few more lies. My parents downsized once more, this time to a modest rental. They are now barely able to pay for their current phone plan utilities and auto insurance. And me, I'm doing fine. Better than good. I take trips. I read. I find dumb movies funny. I go weeks at a time without receiving a single call requesting money. I'm no longer just the guy who created it. I'm the one who finally let go and kept it. And just in case you're curious, I don't regret it, no, not by any means.